Have you ever wondered what surveys on real estate do and why you might need one? Have you ever wanted to know the difference between surveys, appraisals, and assessments? If so, you're in the right place. Stay tuned for the answers to these questions and many more. Hi, I'm William Dolan, and this is Esquire Advice, where we explain complicated and lucrative real estate and business topics. Remember, we are not forming a lawyer-client relationship by way of this channel. Always consult your local attorney before taking any action. With that said, grab a pencil and a piece of paper and get ready to learn. Welcome to our episode on real estate surveys, assessments, and appraisals. But before we get started, please kindly hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can keep bringing you profitable and valuable content. Okay, so we are going to start with an assessment. An assessment, as we are using it in this context, is more specifically known as a tax assessment. This is a number or a value that the local taxing authority, which is often your county or township, assigns to a piece of real estate to determine what property tax amount will be assessed or charged on that property. The tax assessment value in many areas is a percentage of the fair market value of the property as of the last time the taxing authority assigned a value to that property. Sometimes the value could have been assigned very recently or sometimes decades ago. I'm sure many of you have heard people say they have appealed their tax assessment to lower their property taxes. You generally only want to try this in a down real estate market because the net result of the appeal could also be that your property taxes go up if the taxing authority determines the current tax assessment is too low. So you need to be really careful here. Also, generally, once you pull permits for things like finishing a basement, putting an addition on the property, installing a pool, and any other type of significant improvement, that will trigger a new assessment on the property or in addition to the assessment that will cause your tax assessment to go up and therefore your property taxes too. Okay, now let's shift gears to appraisals. An appraisal is a report where a licensed appraiser assigns a value to a piece of real estate. Appraisals are most commonly used by lenders who want to make sure the value of the property on which they are lending is solid. There are three common ways to value real estate in an appraisal. The first is the cost to rebuild the property plus some amount of value for the raw land. The second is what similar homes in the local area are selling for. Here, the appraiser must make adjustments between the comparable sales and the subject property for differences in things like square footage, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, fireplaces, garages, whether there's a finished basement or a pool, just to name a few. If the property is an investment property, the income approach can also be used. This is where the appraiser uses the rental income and cash flow of the property in a formula to assign a value. All right, now what you've all been waiting for, surveys. I have to say that surveys are vastly misunderstood, and quite frankly, often they're confused with appraisals and tax assessments. A survey is a two-dimensional diagram of the parcel, which is performed by a licensed surveyor. It shows structures and boundary and other lines related to that parcel. I already know what you are thinking. Why do I want to pay hundreds of dollars for a survey? I've been to the property. I can see with my own eyes whether there's a shed, a deck, a pool, a driveway, detached garage, and the like. And I can also generally see where the property lines are, which is all sometimes true. However, what you can't tell with the naked eye is whether those structures are all within the proper boundary lines and also the required setback lines. To be sure, in many areas, homes and other structures have to be at least a certain number of feet off the front, back, and side property lines. These are what are referred to as setback lines. If there are boundary or setback line violations, that will render the title to the property unmarketable, and the value of the property could be damaged, or the property could even be potentially rendered worthless. at least in a worst case scenario. Therefore, you need to know about these kinds of issues before you purchase any piece of real estate. Let's illustrate with a few examples. I had a client come to me one time who bought a relatively new, really nice, big home in a beautiful suburban neighborhood through another attorney. However, he did not get a survey when he purchased the property. A few years later, he wanted to put an addition on the property, so he had a survey performed and learned that a large chunk of his driveway and half of his shed was on his one neighbor's property. To make matters worse, and yes, it can get worse, part of his other neighbor's home was on his property. What a disaster mess that was. I've seen situations where an entire pool was built on the neighboring parcel of land. I've seen decks and front porches over setback lines. I've seen sheds over setback lines. I've seen additions partially built on the neighbor's property. Yes, these things do happen, and if you are the unlucky person to whom they happen, it could be a complete financial disaster. Surveys also can help to identify some easements. Whether you are talking about a property line, setback line, or an easement line, it is helpful to know where these are to determine if there are any current violations, just as we've been discussing. But it's also useful if you have any thoughts about doing additions or modifications to the property in the future. The only way to be sure about these things is to have a survey performed. The good news is that your settlement agent will have a survey company that it regularly works with and can arrange to have a survey performed on the property that you're purchasing. Please note that if you do not want a survey, your title policy will accept out issues that could have been identified by a survey, and your settlement agent will also have you sign a waiver at closing, so you cannot come after them either. In other words, you will be completely on your own with these issues with no one to hold accountable. I hope you have found this episode on surveys, assessments, and appraisals helpful. Again, please kindly hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can keep bringing you valuable and profitable content. With that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.